Hello and welcome to STARCAST from Planet Waves. I'm Eric Francis Compolino, host of Planet Waves FM, author of the Planet Waves horoscope, etc., etc. Today's edition is for Thursday, May 28th, 2026. Accompanying an article about the Sagittarius Full Moon, which takes place on Sunday afternoon Eastern Time, as well as the Planet Waves weekly horoscope. I think this is horoscope number 1606, not counting dailies, quarterlies, and annuals. That's a lot of horoscopes. That's a lot of horoscopes, bro. It's still fucking fresh as a flower. By the way, I'm amazed that I'm keeping the horoscope so crackling alive and sprightly after 32 years of doing this. Perhaps that says something about me, or perhaps it says something about astrology. But in any event, that's the deal. So this I'm talking about the full moon and everything I've got cooking, including an article that I just submitted. I'm working on Thursday morning, recording this right now. Sent the article in to our copy team. Unlike most other things on the internet, 3 people read all of my copy before it goes out. One is an astrologically trained hardcore proofreader. Another is astrologically trained, very confident, let's say softcore proofreader. First one's Allison. Second one is Ellie or Liz. And then we have an astrologically trained novelist. You got to have a novelist on the editorial team. And Natalie's keeping an eye on things too. She's coding pages, putting all this stuff together. And by the way, everything is distributed twice. One's to the Planet Waves list and one's to the SUBSTACK list. That's just how things came to be. And I'm very happy that if you're listening on Substack, this Substack is actually growing. It's very nice to see something growing. And I want to thank a Lily Bit, Substack, and Susan Hopkinson for sending your readers and listeners my way. All right, and speaking of readers and listeners, while I'm going over house announcements here, there will be a fabulous Planet Waves FM distributed on Sunday night. That goes out to the Planet Waves FM Substack, also available at planetwaves.fm, and this will be exclusively a tribute to the 100th birth anniversary of Allen Ginsberg and his friend and muse, Neil Cassidy. That will be on planetwaves.fm. I'll probably have it up a little bit early, and if you want to get on that list, just go to planetwavesfm.substack.com. All right, let's get on with the show here. So I'm going to cover some stuff in this STARCAST I did not talk about in the article about the full moon. In the full moon, I kind of do a fairly straight traditional reading of what the full moon is about, the slipping of deadlocks and all of that. Sagittarius full moon is rather optimistic and a little bit naive, and as Debbie Kempton Smith said, like Bobo the Clown, you punch it, it bounces right back up. The full moon is also quite close to the Great Attractor. That is a massive gravitational anomaly that is located in mid-Sagittarius. The Great Attractor it's very special from our local viewpoint, representing a focus of about 100,000 local galaxies. But the thing about the Great Attractor, and I have this from the person who did the work on the Great Attractor and Laniakea, that group of 100,000 galaxies, a guy named Brent Tully at the University of Hawaii. You can look up my interview with him. Yes, he granted an interview about galactic structure to an astrologer. I'm always impressed when these astrophysicists actually talk to me. Said this is the Great Attractor is just a typical feature in the universe. In other words, this is just the way the universe is organized, and our little cluster, teeny little cluster of 100,000 galaxies, which is really not so small, is just basically a typical structure in the universe. So what Tully and crew did was they basically discovered a kind of a cell, a typical cellular structure in the universe. And recently, somebody, JPL or NASA, somebody published an image of what it looks like when you assemble all of these Great Attractor-like clusters. Now, you might say, why do you believe these people? And on this particular issue. I do believe them. They're not talking about particles that nobody can see. They're talking about structures that are visible, that are trackable using the Doppler effect, and that, as far as I have seen, have an astrological effect. And the thing with the Great Attractor is keeping this strictly local within our miniature great heaven. The Great Attractor is drawing us all toward it very quickly, first of all, but it's rushing away from us. Nobody really knows what it is. It has a certain magnetic force that nobody comprehends. Described as a massive pool of subatomic particles. I cannot parse that out in my mind, but whatever. It has this effect, and the effect is, it's hard to even describe these gravitational anomalies in Sagittarius. I have a better idea. Why don't we just go through the weekend and the full moon and see what happens? The full moon will be conjunct the Great Attractor Eastern Time on Sunday night. So let's see what kind of magnitude things play out on. Other things about this full moon that are interesting, in addition to the contact with the Great Attractor, and then later on Monday with the galactic core, the core of our galaxy, is that this full moon is close to the apogee. It's about as far away from the Earth as the moon gets. The moon will appear a little bit smaller. And it's also a blue moon. It won't be blue. It's just called a blue moon, which means every 2.5 to 3 years, there are 2 full moons in a calendar month. That is astrologically irrelevant, but, whatever, symbolic and all folklore and stuff like that. Once in a blue moon, your mom used to say, once in a blue moon. Well, that's actually fairly often every few years. All right, so what else we got going on? So I think that one of the most interesting things happening, we've got a lot of business in Aries, but let's skip to Gemini. Because I've been talking about Aries for 2 frickin' years. If you're interested, just go on Planet Wave Substack, and you'll see I've opened up all those articles, and you can read about Aries until you're like, okay, we're ready for something else. As am I. Now that something else is going to be Gemini. And what we've got in Gemini is, as I have been writing, I tend to stick to things till people get the message, even though I'm not sure that you do, is that the lunar nodes are working their way backwards through Pisces, Virgo. And the lunar nodes, their average motion is always retrograde. And now they're at the end of their journey through Pisces, Virgo. And you can tell because they're in early Pisces, retrograding toward Aquarius and Leo. And that means that they are going to be squaring up with the cluster of planets that is in early Gemini. That cluster of planets, as you may know, includes Sedna as well as Uranus. Sedna, very, very slow mover, 11,400-year orbit, though at its closest to the sun. And Uranus, which is in a conjunction with Sedna now, and I have been going where no astrologer has gone before, which is talking about the nature of the media environment. And to me, the presence of Sedna in Gemini is about the psychic, technological, and mental environment. I've been writing about this all year. As soon as all the Aries stuff, went by, the Chiron-Aries conjunction was done, I moved into Gemini territory. So you can find those articles on substack.planetwaves.net. It's right there. Just look around. Take more than 5 seconds. You'll find them. And what we've got now is Ceres entering this conjunction of Sedna and Uranus. And Ceres is about food. It's a very Virgo-Taurus thing. And yet it is going to be in Gemini. And so that brings up a few metaphors. That is the you are what you think metaphor. You definitely are what you eat, but you also are what you think. You are the quote-unquote content you consume, unquote. If you ever say the words consume, I consume Planet Waves content, make sure you're standing further away than arm's length from me. But people do consume content. They gobble it up. As far as I know, they have most of the content consumers have no way to excrete the content. Isn't that interesting? Talk about consuming content, but where is the excretion of content? Now, people who are writers and artists and so forth, well, we do tend to read a lot, look at a lot of art, look at a lot of pictures, listen to things, and the excretion in my case, in absolutely purified form, is the stuff that we write in the broadcast that we say. So, for example, actually, right now, frankly, I don't give a flying fuck what other astrologers or other content creators say. What you're getting is a totally original reading based loosely on the work of Marshall McLuhan. And that Ceres, I'll attribute my sources. Ceres is about mechanization. Said Al Morrison, fabulous 20th century astrologer. He has a book of his compiled work out. If you're really into astrology, look up Al Morrison book and you'll find it. The only one book, and his articles, emails, and lectures and stuff like this that he wrote. Never wrote a book, but a very brilliant astrologer. Gave us Chiron. Without Al Morrison, we wouldn't have Chiron. And he made a comment about Ceres in one article where he said, yes, Ceres is about food and grain, but it's about post-agricultural food and grain. Ceres is the agricultural revolution. It is after people were done hunting and gathering and painting on the interior of the walls of caves, which is fabulous. My favorite art in the world is painted on the walls of caves underground by aforementioned hunter-gatherers. We got into manufacturing food. And he said by dint of that, and that's represented by Ceres, the Roman goddess of grain, root of the word cereal, and then he said, well, look, by extension, the mechanization of anything can be represented by Ceres. This is perfect. Ceres in Gemini is about the mechanization of thought. Conjunct Uranus and Sedna, that's about the mechanization of thought in this digital environment, in this AI environment. Could you have more mechanized thought than a large language model running your life? Question mark. All right, so Ceres is now in the mix. So it's now Ceres and Sedna and Uranus bending the lunar nodes at 90 degrees to the lunar nodes, which is a critical place. Anything at 90 degrees to the nodes is critical in the chart. If you want to have fun, go to serennu.com, SERENNU.com. This is on the free side of the website. Type in your birth data, go to 90 degree sword, look up the lunar nodes, see what sign they're in, and notice what is on and square the nodes. Stick within a degree or two. Don't go out wide and sloppy. Start narrow, go wide, not the other way around. There's times when you start wide and you go narrow. But most of the time, if you start with a precise reading of what's within 1 or 2 degrees, you're going to get information you can trust, and then you can slowly expand from there. See what square your lunar nodes. Look up the asteroids. There's not articles written about every asteroid, but there's articles written about a lot of them, and I've covered a lot of the trans-Neptunian objects and the centaurs. You just have to look a little bit. The annual edition of Planet Waves, by the way, is going to be a minor planet-focused annual edition focusing the Chiron return of Chiron. More on that another time. All right, so we are at this crucial moment now. It's somewhat fleeting. It's somewhat temporary because the lunar nodes are going to be, they get into Aquarius and Leo this summer. They get there. So we only have this. We have now to understand what's going on with Ceres, Uranus, and Sedna bending the lunar nodes, which are saying get real about the situation with this digital environment that we're in and the way that it is impacting all of us, and particularly more than anything, and I forgot to say this in the article, my sense is that the deepest, most profound impact, particularly in the Western world, has been on our social relationships in the civilized, rich, wealthy West. Now, I don't think this is so bad in Mexico, but Africa has been taken over by cell phones, completely taken over by cell phones. I don't really know much about what's going on in South America. I don't know if Aborigines in Australia and New Zealand have cell phones and what it's done to their society. But I can tell you about where I live, and I can tell you about the places where I have lived, and phones had taken over easily. By 2004, 2005, society was dominated by phones. People were on their phones all the frickin' time, their flip phones. Then the iPhone comes in starting in 2007, and right after that, Facebook comes along and Instagram comes along, and it completely reshapes the entire social structure of society, which also is about reshaping the internal social map of what human beings think they are. And we're living with this, and we're living with this in an unconscious way. You ever go to like a workshop and somebody says, "You're being so unconscious." Well, yeah, here we are in our big spiritual workshop, and everyone's being unconscious. And they still want us to think that the Communist Manifesto or the Constitution is more important than the fact that basically for the past 200 years we have been bowled over and tsunamied by electricity. But this really goes back to the development of the telegraph, circa 1850, so it's not quite 250 years. But the experiments into electricity were going on in the late 18th century, but they start to drape the landscape with wires around the time of the American Civil War, and it has been a shit show ever since, in a whole new way, mainly a shit show at the speed of light. And so it has been extremely disorienting for people to be completely immersed in communication environments where they are communicating at the speed of light. This is highly confusing. And one of the things that it is doing is that it is desexing everyone. It is degendering everyone, because in digital space, where you spend most of your time or much of your time, and where everyone around you spends much of their time or most of their time, in the case of some people, all of their time, and I read a statistic that young girls are spending 10 hours a day on TikTok. 10 hours a day on TikTok. What the? You're not a male or a female. You're not a boy or a girl. You're not a man or a woman. You are a gender-neutral entity. And if you want to find some gender, you want to find some sex, well, you've got to get back into your body and find it in your body. And as the digital environment takes over, the antipathy toward sex and normal relating between men and women is further and further and further pathologized. And we hear about this in declining birth rates. We hear about this in people not wanting to be in relationships and so forth. But I don't hear anybody complaining too loud about how this is some kind of a direct effect of exposure to the digital environment. And yes, we are also being affected by another invisible environment, the environment associated with hormone disruptors, various things, starting with DDT, PCBs, dioxin, all of these plastics that we're doing, microplastics now have infused and infested everything, and where every fucking thing comes in plastic. You buy all kinds of pure food at supposedly pure food, various different organic shops, farmers markets, and whatever, it comes wrapped and or frozen in plastic. This is completely ridiculous. What, no one's ever heard of like wax paper? I don't know how bad that is for you, but it's a lot better than freezing things in plastic, I'll tell you that, because the plastic flakes apart when you freeze it. If you're taking meat, for example, out of frozen meat, out of plastic, soak it, like it says in the Bible, like Moses told his people, whatever book of the Old Testament, the Jewish kosher law, which is genius. The soaking and salting of meat, soak your meat or wash it off, like wash it, like keep a special scrunchie pad and scrub it off to get the frickin' microplastics out of it if you can. Some things you can't do that, but some things you can. All right, so we're in the middle of this kind of environmental bombing. And a lot of what it's taking away, it's completely disrupted the social environment, which is based on the polarity between men and women. I will now cease this discussion, and I want to talk about something else, which is the family hunger game pattern. I began writing about this 2 years ago in June. I was staying in my little favorite motel room up by that big cliff in what's called the Catskill Mountain House Cliff. There are these people I can go off season. I could pay cash and get super cheap and stay in a little motel room, and it was a wonderful place to write. And I started writing about the family hunger game there one day when I got curious about the amount of liquor consumed on the planet. Beer, wine, and wicker. How big of a lake would that fill? And I kept envisioning all the bars in China and Japan and Europe and the United States and South America and South Africa and all that stuff, Australia, New Zealand, and and I couldn't get a real number, but finally I got a real number. The amount of liquor, wine, and beer consumed in the United States is enough to fill the Ashokan Reservoir, the primary reservoir feeding New York City, for a year. In other words, it's about 123 billion gallons are contained in this man-made lake called the Ashokan Reservoir, opened circa 1912 or something. That lake, that reservoir, it is like 12 miles end to end, 2 miles wide. At its deepest, several hundred feet deep, that's 123 billion gallons. That's how much liquor, wine, and beer is consumed every year in the world. That is freaking crazy. And my concern immediately went to, what is the impact on families? What is the impact on families of having so many people just basically pickled all the time? And I realize this is sensitive territory because a lot of people depend on alcohol. This is absolutely not a moral judgment. This is just a what is going on? What are we doing to ourselves? How do we actually feel kind of situation? So the Family Hunger Games is, first of all, nobody else is on to this except me. They've had plenty of opportunity to read my stuff about it. It takes place right now. It's in mid-Capricorn. The leading actor in the Family Hunger Games is Pholus. Pholus is at 12 degrees, 12 right now, 1222 as of the full moon, 1222 Capricorn, accompanied by, that's an ancestral influence associated with alcohol. I'm going to have a lot about this in the Family Constellations reading. It's going to be a magnificent mid-year reading, a therapy product, basically. Conjunct Kwaor, that's Tongva people, Los Angeles-based creation myth, the Indians from Los Angeles, and Ixion, first murderer, and Cupido, four points gathered in mid-Capricorn. Pluto is done, but they're not. And then I am adding into that a point in Aries, that point being Salacia. And my core theory here, and this comes partly from, having started tantric training in 1992, blessed by my Gestalt therapist, Joseph Trousseau, the undercover tantrika, is that who we really are, has a lot to do with who we really are sexually. And the thing that gets crushed in most families is who we are sexually. There are families that haven't gotten over the son coming out as gay in 1975. They're still freaked out that he came out as gay. All the LGBTQ centers and rainbow flags in the world can't stop them from being slightly disturbed that Dominic is gay. And it's like, oh, well, we're kind of all used to it by now. And everybody else seems to think it's perfectly normal. And could Dominic be anything but gay? Like, once you know Dominic, that's it. Dominic's gay. Get fucking used to it. And everyone is used to it. What's the situation in the family? Well, I have a feeling that there's some tension. And this is not the only family where they can't get used to the fact that their daughter's a $3 bill. Well, there's a lot of kinds of $3 bills, and in fact, everyone is a form of a $3 bill. Every person on the planet has their own unique individual sexual orientation, and their own gender orientation, and their own affectual orientation. The mechanized cookie cutter, known as marriage, is a frosting, heart-shaped thing on it. Good. Cupid. Done. That make a million of them. That thing, that mechanism, it's not that. That's just a complete. That's just a complete cover up. That makes it look like it's one size fits all. And then Obersgefell, did I say that right? Gay marriage also makes it seem like one size fits all. And I was very happy about Obersgefell, but not what happened after it. I thought this is great. The gay people have reached the promised land. Let's have a big party. But the gay party is over now. It used to be that you were gay when you were gay, and now you're very serious when you're gay. So they should stop calling it gay and start calling it serious. Yep. Oh, my friend Bill, he came out as serious. It just doesn't seem like it's quite as much fun, but it is somewhat closer to the truth. All right, so everybody is a $3 bill. Everyone is queer. Kurt Cobain said it best. What else can I say? Everyone is gay. And that, to me, means everyone has their own unique, individual, distinct, largely indescribable sexual orientation, and that is often what is crushed by, concealed by, made to be kept secret by the family structure. And so we see that as series, that's a different story. We talked about that 15 minutes ago. Salacia squared the family Hunger Games. Salacia, this outer planet. I have an article about Salacia called Proper Introduction to Salacia. I think it's easy to find. I've taken the password off. If you ever find a Planet Waves article that's still got a password on it, write to me. I'll take the password off. I'm trying to make every past Planet Waves article free. And the article about Salacia is a pretty darn good article, and really the only one of its kind about Salacia. So my theory there is that you have all of this mishigas in the family, all of this control and manipulation and drowning things in alcohol and mean weirdos and transgressing abusive types of people in the family system. And there's some nice ones, but it's like there's like usually one nice one in the family. There's usually one or two actually kind people who don't judge you for who you are and know what to get you for Christmas because they thought about it for 5 minutes. Salacia is saying that this true, very fragile, very let's say elemental sexual orientation that each of us is, has, and possesses gets mixed up with the family pattern, and then that's the thing that's hidden, and that's basically what pushes people not only into the closet but into this deeply concealed space within themselves where they're afraid to reveal anything at all about their sexuality. This is the rule about sexuality. This is why the rainbow flag is a cover-up. It contains absolutely no information. It is a symbol for all that you still can't talk about. And it is, when are we going to get over this? Well, I'm not so sure that we are. There seems to be a lot of interest in OnlyFans. Some millions of dollars an hour, a minute is spent in California on OnlyFans. That doesn't tell you anything about sexuality. One of the Book of Blues superstars, Zoe West, spent a few years on OnlyFans, and we have had a few conversations about it, but it is not pleasant. You don't make any money, and it's all an act. She even fooled me, who's known her for almost 20 years. So I get to see her in a month or two and going to find out the inside story about that. But people are pumping money by the millions and millions and millions of dollars into OnlyFans, quote-unquote sex. It's de-sex digital sex. And what do you know? You don't know anything about anyone. It's all just more cover-up. Okay, so where's the real interest in learning and understanding everyone? Well, I get that everyone basically in some way feels betrayed by sex. That was supposed to promise them a marriage of some kind. It was supposed to promise them some form of bliss, and they wind up getting pregnant or getting sexually transmitted disease. We'll look into that. They're not what they seem. And it's like no one has a good thing to say about sex. We're just back to the end of the sexual revolution means that, okay, it's fine. Everyone can just simply be disgusted by sex and the opposite sex. Well, I think that gender relations were much, much, much better in the 1940s and the 1950s, where it was least possible to do things more or less go unnoticed. Nobody gave a toss. And now it's like it is absolutely vogue for a great many young men to hate women and a great many young women to hate men. And is anyone saying, how did this get to be this way? What exactly is going on? What has led to this? How are we going to have a society where the young men hate the young women and the young women hate the young men? This seems to be standard fare for Gen Z, this suspicion and this like lack of simpatico, lack of curiosity, total intimidation and judgment and withdrawal and seclusion. This is a digital effect, and it is affecting everyone. though there are certain older people whose relationships are established. They don't have anything to do, but it's terrible on people whose relationships are not established. It is terrible on intergenerational relationships. The trust and antipathy are through the roof. When are we going to have this conversation? When are we going to discuss this facet of the environment? Well, we can talk about the ozone, talk about acid rain, we can talk about global warming, we can talk about microplastics. When can we talk about this? I say let's talk about it soon. So what am I getting at here? Saturn is square Pholus right now. Saturn, as of the full moon, Saturn is at 12 degrees Aries and 11 arc minutes. That's just an address. It's not mathematics. Pholus is 12 degrees Capricorn, 22 arc minutes. That's a very tight square. And so we have Saturn starting to put a lid on. It is starting to put, it's a little bit, the myth of Pholus is a lid lifted off a giant vat of ancestral wine left by Dionysus to the centaurs. This is a long story that I'm in all week. I've been in a discussion with Melanie Reinhardt trying to parse out this part of the myth. What is spirit? What is getting drunk? What is the nature of this wine left to the centaurs by Dionysus, which is then consumed by Heracles, and bad things happen? We're seeing that lid put back on the vat of wine, metaphorically. In other words, I think there's a cooling down of some of this runaway reaction stuff associated with Pholus. Pholus is basically the runaway reaction. Note, over the past week, there have been 2 chemical runaway reactions, one in Washington, one in California. They both seem to be contained. They did not go completely out of control. I think maybe the vat collapsed in one of them. These things could be a lot worse. Look up the incident in Nitro, West Virginia. If you type in my name with the Nitro incident, you'll get some of my coverage, and that was back in the 40s. Dioxin was discovered through this runaway chemical reaction. That was bad. Seveso, Italy, that was bad. The East Palestine, I don't really know what happened in East Palestine. I stopped covering it because I suspected something else was going on. But this, at least they seem to have mitigated this. That, to me, is symbolized by Saturn square Pholus. And it's going to be Saturn square, Saturn conjunct Salacia also. The square to Pholus happens, then the conjunction to Salacia happens. Here we have a possibly, can we have a mature conversation about this, please? Please, can we have a mature conversation about this? I will believe that people are interested in a mature conversation when people start to approach me to have a mature conversation, because I hold out the space of the mature conversation at all times. It does happen in my astrology consulting sessions. That's where people do tend to reach out. I'm aware of people's limits. I'm aware of their limited capacity to reveal things. And I will say that in the past, in, let's say, the first half of my career, as opposed to the second, the clients were much, much more interested in figuring out what was actually going on with them, with their sexuality, what the story was, even what the story of the ancestral sexual abuse was, what the story of the predators in the family was, how people responded to them, who was participating in the cover-up. The conversation can happen in a place called Book of Blue. That's bookofblue.substack.com. Request a subscription, and I will write back to you. But I even noticed within the Book of Blue area in Substack, which is a closed area, there's about 40 people in there. There's not really a discussion. There's not much self-disclosure. Basically, I do all of the self-disclosure and people read it. I mean, that's fun in a way, but it's only so much fun. The idea here is we need to get a conversation going about who we are, what we are, and what's going on that is set outside of a political context. The family Hunger Games in Capricorn is set in a political context. Capricorn always represents, first and foremost, a corporate and political context, beginning with that of the family. That of the family. So, I will concede that things are thawing when I see the conversation start to happen. By the way, another part of this conversation is that it is very woman-centric where it is happening. It's either woman-centric, which means heteros gather around a woman leader, or it's homosexual, meaning the gay men gather around a male leader. Like the rainbow flag, both of these exclude heterosexual men. So until we have heterosexual men in the conversation, there's not going to be a conversation. The conversation that takes part exclusively among women is highly limited in its use. My good friend and teacher, Betty Dodson, seemed to not be that interested in having a conversation that included men. I'm fortunate I was one of the few men who dared to step into the lair of the goddess and to have the conversation, but they were not interested. That whole scene was not interested in men, in maleness and masculinity, in men's experience. It was, in a sense, completely feminist. And I think that in order to have a conversation that is an honest conversation among women, and to have a conversation that includes men, we need to set aside some of these feminist tropes and actually look at what men and women are at our true essence. At our true essence. A commenter wrote to me once, every now and then there's a little ray of light that comes through and said, the thing about this whole scene of what's happened under 2,000 years of Christendom and God knows how long before that of Judaism, and it seems like the most recent culture that aspired in any way to any form of sexual enlightenment was ancient Egypt. Well, men and women don't generally ever get to know one another at our essence as men and women. We get to know one another as beings that have been shaped by political concepts. Political concepts. When you're walking around and you see a rainbow flag, just contemplate for a second, well, gee, that has stripes like the American flag. Maybe this is a political statement. Well, what's underneath the politics is your biology, your emotions, your unique, distinct presentation of who you are. All right, more on this as as we go forward together here into the future. I would remind you again, I have finished Planet Waves FM for tomorrow night. It is great fun. It basically starts with the story of Allen Ginsberg dropping the poem Howl on suburban, segregated, homophobic Jim Crow, Middle America in 1950, pre-Martin Luther King, pre-Stonewall. It was a different country. Middle America in 1956, and all that ensued. I read a good chunk of Howl. I play the first recorded public reading of Howl by Ginsberg. I read a diversity of other Ginsberg poems. I have two Grateful Dead songs that are tributes to Neil Cassidy, who was the driver of the bus Further in the summer of 1964. What else have we got going on here? It's a really fun show, and it'll come out on Planet Waves FM Substack, and it'll be on planetwaves.fm. I'll probably have that up on the main website tonight. The mailing will go out to Substack tomorrow Friday at about 5 o'clock. Thank you to all who subscribe to Planet Waves, who send in a little bit of money. If you don't want to get a full subscription, you just go to planetwaves.fm. You can make a donation. Write to me. I'll give you what you want, or you can subscribe at full fare to the Planet Waves Substack or various levels on Planet Waves. I and my friendly crew here do our best to make sure that it is worth far, far more than your money. It is worth your time and your trust. That's what is actually of value in this world. $10, $12, $20 is a joke. Your trust, your time, our honor, our commitment to serving you in this fraught, challenging time. That's why to subscribe to Planet Waves. That's why I put a little bit into into the jar at the door of the ashram. While you're here, help us sweep up a little bit. Please add a couple of comments every now and then. And thank you to all who do, to my astrology clients, to my customers and my readers, and the growing scene on YouTube. All right, signing off from the Harshaw House at 11:11 a.m. Make a wish. Lots of love, and bye for now.